The train conductor checked my ticket and whispered, "Don't turn around. The man in seat 12 is watching you closely." My blood went cold as I stared at the conductor's weathered face. He was probably in his 60s, the kind of guy who'd seen everything in 30 years of working the rails between Berlin and Prague. His name tag read Klaus, and his eyes held genuine concern. "Keep reading your book," he said quietly, adjusting his cap. "Act normal, but when we reach the next station in 20 minutes, get off. Trust me." I nodded and forced myself to turn a page in the thriller novel I'd been pretending to read since boarding in Berlin 3 hours ago. My hands were shaking slightly as I processed what Klaus had just told me. Someone in seat 12 was watching me. But why? I was just a software developer heading to Prague for a conference. Nothing special about me or my trip. Klaus moved on to check other passengers' tickets, but not before slipping a small piece of paper under my book. I waited 2 minutes before carefully unfolding it. Written in German. "American with backpack. Been taking photos of you with telephoto lens. Not tourist behavior." My stomach dropped. I was indeed American, and I did have a backpack in the overhead compartment. Someone had been photographing me without my knowledge. But who? And why would they need telephoto shots when they were sitting close enough to just use a phone camera, unless they didn't want me to notice what they were doing? I forced myself to keep reading the same paragraph over and over while my mind raced. I'd boarded this train in Berlin after spending 3 days at a tech conference. Standard business trip, nothing unusual. I'd presented a paper on database security protocols, attended some meetings, eaten too much German food. The most exciting thing I'd done was visit a museum, so why was someone surveilling me? The train swayed gently as we passed through the German countryside. Rolling hills, small towns, everything peaceful and normal, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being hunted by someone I couldn't see. I tried to remember if I'd noticed anything suspicious during my time in Berlin. Had someone been following me? Had I said something or met someone that might have attracted unwanted attention? Nothing came to mind. My conference presentation had been technical and boring, hardly the stuff of international intrigue. Klaus made his way back through the car, collecting tickets from passengers who'd boarded at the last station. When he reached my row again, he leaned down and spoke in English with a thick accent. "You are traveling alone, yes?" I nodded. "Good. The man has been on this train since Munich. He boarded after you, but he was already watching for you at the platform. Professional behavior. Very careful. Very patient." My mouth went dry. Professional behavior suggested this wasn't just some random creep. This was someone with training, someone who knew how to conduct surveillance without being detected. "What should I do?" I whispered. Klaus glanced around to make sure no other passengers were listening. "Next station is Nuremberg. Many people get off there. Use the crowd for cover. Go to the main terminal and wait near the police kiosk. If he follows you off the train, approach the officers immediately. But what if he doesn't follow me? What if he just stays on the train? Then you take the next train to Prague in 2 hours. Different route, different schedule. Much harder for him to predict your movements." The plan made sense, but I was terrified of making any sudden moves. What if this guy was armed? What if confronting him made things worse? Klaus must have seen the fear in my expression because he added, "I will be watching too. If something happens on the platform, I will call for help. You are not alone." 10 minutes later, Klaus came back one more time and made an announcement in German that we were approaching Nuremberg. Passengers started gathering their belongings, and I could hear people moving around behind me. The temptation to turn and look at seat 12 was overwhelming, but I forced myself to keep staring out the window. Klaus stopped beside my seat and said loudly enough for others to hear, "Sir, there is a problem with your ticket. You need to come with me to resolve it." He was giving me a reason to move around the train car without looking suspicious. I stood up and followed him toward the front of the car, finally getting a chance to glance back. Seat 12 was occupied by a man in his 40s, wearing a dark jacket and baseball cap. He had professional-grade camera equipment in his lap and was definitely not your typical tourist. When he saw me looking in his direction, he quickly turned to stare out his window, but I caught a glimpse of his face. Square jaw, expensive sunglasses despite being indoors, the kind of deliberately unremarkable appearance that screamed intelligence operative. "You see him now?" Klaus whispered as we reached the front of the car. "Yes, he looks military." "Yeah, I think so too. Very disciplined posture. Moves like soldier." Klaus handed me a business card. "My nephew works for German Federal Police. If you have trouble after leaving train, call this number. Tell him Uncle Klaus sent you." The train was slowing as we approached Nuremberg station. Through the windows, I could see the platform filling with waiting passengers. Klaus was right. There would be a crowd to blend into. But I was also giving up the relative safety of the train for the unknown dangers of a busy train station. "Ready?" Klaus asked. I nodded, grabbed my backpack from the overhead compartment, and followed the stream of passengers toward the exits. As we disembarked, I kept Klaus between myself and seat 12, using his bulk as a shield. The platform was chaos. People reuniting with family, dragging luggage, shouting directions in multiple languages. Perfect cover for someone trying to disappear. I walked quickly toward the main terminal, following signs for the police kiosk Klaus had mentioned. Behind me, I could hear footsteps that seemed to match my pace exactly. Not running, not obviously following, but definitely maintaining the same distance. When I sped up, the footsteps sped up. When I slowed to look at a departure board, They slowed too. Whoever was back there was good at this. The police kiosk was near the main entrance, staffed by 2 officers who looked bored and professional. One was a woman in her 30s, the other a younger man who kept checking his watch like he was counting down to the end of his shift. I approached them and tried to explain in broken German that someone had been following me. The female officer switched to English. "You are American?" "Yes. Someone on the train was taking photos of me without permission. The conductor told me to report it." She looked skeptical. "Taking photos is not illegal in public spaces. Do you have evidence of harassment or threats?" "No, but—" I realized how paranoid I sounded. A businessman complaining that someone took his picture wasn't exactly a police emergency. The officer was already losing interest when I heard Klaus's voice behind me. "Excuse me, officers. I am conductor on the Berlin-Prague line. I witnessed suspicious surveillance of this passenger. Professional-grade equipment, coordinated timing, not normal tourist behavior." Klaus's authority as a railway employee carried more weight than my tourist complaints. The female officer straightened up and asked Klaus several questions in rapid German. Then she turned back to me. "The conductor says this man followed you from Munich and was using telephoto lens for photography. This is unusual behavior. Where are you staying tonight?" "I was supposed to continue to Prague. I have a hotel reservation there." "We recommend you change your plans. Stay in Nuremberg tonight. Different hotel than your original booking. If someone is tracking your movements, breaking your pattern makes you safer." She handed me a card. "This is Tourist Information Center. They can help with accommodation. If you see the same man again, call us immediately." I thanked the officers and Klaus, then walked to the tourist center feeling slightly ridiculous but also relieved. Maybe I was overreacting to an innocent misunderstanding. Maybe the guy in seat 12 was just a photography enthusiast who happened to like candid shots of train passengers. But Klaus's concerned expression suggested otherwise, and he'd seen enough suspicious behavior over the years to know the difference between normal and dangerous. The tourist center found me a room at a small hotel near the old town, far from the main railway station where someone might expect me to stay. I paid cash and used a fake name, feeling like a character in one of those spy movies I'd always thought were unrealistic. As I walked to the hotel, I kept checking reflections in shop windows and changing direction randomly to see if anyone was following. Nothing obvious, but that didn't mean I was safe. The hotel room was small but clean, with a window overlooking a quiet side street. I locked the door, closed the curtains, and tried to think rationally about what was happening. I pulled out my laptop and started researching the conference I'd attended in Berlin. Had I accidentally stumbled onto something sensitive? Had my presentation on database security touched on classified information without me realizing it? The conference had been hosted by a technology company called Nexus Systems, and most of the attendees were software developers like myself. But looking at the attendee list more carefully, I noticed several people with vague job titles like security consultant and data analyst, who worked for companies I'd never heard of. I started Googling these companies and found something interesting. 3 of them were shell corporations with no real business activities. Their websites looked professional, but contained no specific information about what they actually did, the kind of fronts that intelligence agencies might use to insert operatives into technical conferences. Had I been speaking to spies without knowing it? My presentation had focused on encryption protocols and database vulnerabilities, exactly the kind of information that foreign governments might want to steal. But I hadn't revealed anything that wasn't already public knowledge, unless someone thought I knew more than I was sharing. I tried to remember my conversations with other attendees. Had anyone asked unusual questions? Had anyone seemed overly interested in my work or background? There was one guy who'd approached me after my presentation, a tall man with a slight accent who'd asked very specific questions about government database security. At the time, I'd assumed he was just a fellow developer interested in security protocols. But thinking back, his questions had been unusually focused on weaknesses rather than strengths. I searched through my conference materials and found his business card. Viktor Kozlov, Senior Data Analyst, Baltic Tech Solutions. I Googled Baltic Tech Solutions and found a website that looked professional but felt empty. Stock photos, generic descriptions, no real substance. Classic front company. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Mr. Davidson, we need to discuss your presentation. Meet me at Café Zentral tomorrow at 10 a.m. Come alone." My blood turned to ice. Someone had my phone number and knew I was in Nuremberg. They also knew my real name, which I hadn't given to the hotel when I checked in. I was definitely being tracked by professionals. I immediately called Klaus's nephew at the federal police number he'd given me. "Guten Tag, this is Detective Muller." "Detective, your Uncle Klaus told me to call you. Someone's been following me since Berlin, and now they want to meet." I explained the entire situation while Detective Muller took notes. When I read him the text message, he became much more serious. "Mr. Davidson, this sounds like industrial espionage or foreign intelligence operation. Do not go to this meeting. We will handle this officially. What should I do?" "Stay in your hotel. Do not leave for any reason. We are sending officers to your location now. And forward me all information about this Baltic Tech Solutions company." Within an hour, 2 plainclothes detectives arrived at my hotel. They interviewed me for 2 hours, taking detailed notes about the conference, the suspicious attendees, and my presentation content. They also examined my laptop and phone for any signs of malware or tracking software. "Mr. Davidson," the lead detective said, We believe you have inadvertently become involved in an intelligence operation. Your database security expertise made you a target for information gathering. But I don't know any classified information. Everything in my presentation was public knowledge. Perhaps, but they may think you have access to more sensitive material through your work. Or they may want to recruit you as an asset for future operations. The detective explained that several European technology conferences had been infiltrated by foreign intelligence services looking to recruit or compromise Western tech experts. My presentation on database vulnerabilities might have attracted attention from groups interested in cyber warfare capabilities. We are going to arrange secure transportation for you back to the United States, the detective continued. But first, we want to set up a controlled meeting with this Viktor Kozlov to see what he wants and gather intelligence on his operation. You want me to meet with him? Isn't that dangerous? We will have surveillance teams in place and undercover officers nearby. You will wear a wire, and we will monitor everything. If he makes any threats or attempts to compromise you, we intervene immediately. The plan terrified me, but I agreed to cooperate. The next morning, I walked to Café Zentral, wearing a wire, and feeling like my heart might explode from anxiety. The cafe was busy with morning commuters, which the detective said would provide good cover for their surveillance teams. Viktor Kozlov was already there, sitting at a corner table with clear sight lines to all exits. He looked exactly like what I imagined a spy would look like. Forgettable features, expensive but unremarkable clothes, the kind of person who could blend into any crowd. "Mr. Davidson, thank you for coming," he said in lightly accented English as I sat down. "I apologize for the dramatic circumstances, but we needed to speak privately." "About what?" "About your work. Specifically, your expertise in database security and encryption protocols." A waitress approached, and Victor ordered coffee in fluent German. I asked for the same, buying time while trying to stay calm. "Your presentation in Berlin was quite impressive," Victor continued. "You demonstrated sophisticated understanding of vulnerabilities in government database systems. That's all public information, nothing classified. Of course, but your practical experience implementing these systems suggests you might have additional insights. My organization is willing to compensate you generously for consulting work." He slid a business card across the table. This one was different from the Baltic Tech Solutions card he'd given me at the conference. It simply said V. Kozlov with a phone number. "What kind of consulting work?" "Security assessments, penetration testing, identifying weaknesses in critical infrastructure databases." Victor leaned forward slightly. "We represent certain clients who need to understand the vulnerabilities of systems they depend on for national security." "Which clients?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss details until you agree to work with us, but I can tell you the compensation would be substantial. 6 figures for initial assessment work." Through my earpiece, I could hear Detective Muller's voice giving me instructions. "Keep him talking. Try to get him to reveal more about his organization." "This sounds interesting," I said, trying to project enthusiasm while my stomach churned. "What would be the first step?" "A demonstration of your capabilities. We have access to a test database system that mimics certain government installations. If you can successfully penetrate it and document the vulnerabilities, we move forward with a formal consulting arrangement." Victor pulled out a tablet and showed me specifications for a database system that looked remarkably similar to ones used by the U.S. Department of Defense. Not identical, but close enough that someone who could hack this test system would probably be able to access the real thing. "When would this demonstration take place?" I asked. "Today, if you're available. We have a secure facility here in Nuremberg where you can work without distractions." Every alarm bell in my head was screaming. He wanted to isolate me in a secure facility to perform what amounted to practice runs for cyber attacks against U.S. government systems. Through my earpiece, Detective Muller said urgently, "Do not agree to go anywhere with him. We're moving in now." But before I could respond, Victor's expression changed. He was looking past me toward the cafe entrance, and I could see tension creeping into his posture. "There appears to be a problem," he said quietly. "This meeting is over." He stood up and walked quickly toward the back exit without looking back. I turned to see Detective Mueller and his partner entering the cafe, trying to look casual but obviously searching for someone. Victor had spotted the surveillance and escaped. 20 minutes later, I was back at the police station giving another statement while Detective Mueller coordinated with federal authorities. "Viktor Kozlov is not his real name," the detective explained. "The phone number on his card traces to a burner phone that was probably discarded as soon as he left the cafe. But we did learn something valuable from your conversation." "What's that?" "His organization has access to detailed specifications of U.S. government database systems. Either they have a source inside American intelligence agencies, or they've already successfully penetrated those systems through other means." The implications were staggering. I'd accidentally stumbled into the middle of an active cyber warfare operation targeting my own country's critical infrastructure. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we coordinate with American authorities. You'll be debriefed by CIA and NSA when you return to the United States. Your expertise in database security makes you valuable as a consultant for protecting against exactly the kind of attacks this group is planning." The detective handed me a secure phone. "Use this for all communications until you're safely back in the U.S. Your regular phone may be compromised." 2 days later, I was on a military transport flight back to Washington, D.C., still trying to process everything that had happened. A simple business trip to present a paper on database security had turned into an international incident involving foreign intelligence services and potential cyber attacks against American infrastructure. At CIA headquarters in Langley, I spent 3 days in debriefing sessions with analysts who asked incredibly detailed questions about Viktor Kozlov, the conference attendees, and the technical specifications he'd shown me. They were particularly interested in the test database system he'd described, which apparently matched classified government installations with suspicious accuracy. Mr. Davidson, the lead analyst said on my final day of debriefing, we'd like to offer you a consulting position with our cybersecurity division. Your experience with this operation gives you unique insights into how foreign intelligence services recruit technical experts. I'm not really spy material, I replied. I just wanted to give a presentation and go home. The best intelligence assets are often people who never intended to become involved in intelligence work. You've already proven you can handle pressure and follow instructions in dangerous situations. The offer was tempting. The salary was triple what I made in the private sector, and the work would involve protecting critical American infrastructure from exactly the kind of attacks Viktor Kozlov's organization was planning. But it would also mean giving up my normal life and potentially facing more situations like the one I'd just survived. I asked for time to think about it. A week later, I was back in my apartment in Seattle, trying to return to normal life. But every time my phone rang or someone approached me on the street, I felt a spike of adrenaline. The experience in Germany had changed my perspective on how easily ordinary people could become targets of international espionage operations. I kept the secure phone the German police had given me, and occasionally I received updates on the investigation. Viktor Kozlov had vanished completely, but intelligence agencies were tracking similar recruitment attempts at technology conferences across Europe and North America. My case had helped identify a broader pattern of foreign intelligence services targeting Western tech experts for cyber warfare operations. 3 months later, I made my decision. I called the CIA number they'd given me and accepted the consulting position, not because I wanted to become a spy, but because I realized that people with technical expertise had a responsibility to help protect the systems that ordinary citizens depended on for their safety and security. My first assignment was developing training programs to help other tech professionals recognize and report foreign recruitment attempts. We created seminars for major technology conferences, teaching attendees how to spot the warning signs of intelligence operations and what to do if they were approached by suspicious individuals. Klaus, the train conductor who'd first warned me about the surveillance, received a commendation from the German government for his quick thinking and professional judgment. We stayed in touch through email, and he often shared stories about other suspicious passengers he'd noticed during his years working the railways. His experience proved that ordinary citizens with good instincts and willingness to get involved could play crucial roles in protecting national security. A year after the incident, I was giving a presentation at a cybersecurity conference in London when I noticed a familiar face in the audience. Not Viktor Kozlov, but someone who gave me the same feeling of being watched and evaluated. After my presentation, he approached me with questions that sounded innocent, but felt like probes for classified information. This time, I was ready. I engaged him in conversation while secretly recording everything on the surveillance equipment CIA had taught me to use. Within hours, British intelligence had identified him as a known operative from the same organization that had recruited Viktor Kozlov. The network was still active, still recruiting, still planning cyber attacks against Western infrastructure. But now we were watching them as carefully as they were watching us. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if Klaus hadn't warned me about the man in seat 12. Would I have continued to prog, oblivious to the surveillance, and eventually agreed to Viktor's consulting offer? Would I have unknowingly helped foreign intelligence services penetrate American government databases? The scary truth is that ordinary people become involved in espionage operations every day without realizing it. A helpful stranger offering career opportunities, a romantic interest who asks too many questions about your work, a business contact who pushes for information about security protocols. Any of these could be attempts to recruit assets or gather intelligence. My experience taught me that the most important defense against these operations isn't sophisticated technology or extensive training. It's awareness, instinct, and the willingness of ordinary people like Klaus to speak up when something doesn't feel right. The real heroes of counterintelligence are often people who never intended to become involved in spy games, but recognized danger and took action anyway. That train conductor saved more than just my personal safety. He helped protect critical American infrastructure from cyber attacks that could have affected millions of people. The next time you're traveling and someone's behavior seems off, trust your instincts. The next time a business contact asks unusual questions about your work, pay attention to what they're really asking. And if someone like Klaus ever whispers a warning about the person watching you from seat 12, listen to them. Your safety might depend on it, and so might your country's security. 2 years after this all started, I still take trains sometimes for business travel. Every time the conductor checks my ticket, I remember Klaus and how one observant railway employee changed the course of an international intelligence operation. Sometimes the most important battles are fought by people who never signed up to be soldiers, in places where no one expects to find a war. But those battles matter just as much as the ones that make headlines, and the people who fight them deserve to be remembered. Klaus retired from the railway service last year, but his nephew tells me he still takes trains as a passenger and still watches for suspicious behavior among his fellow travelers. Once a protector, always a protector. That's the kind of person who keeps the rest of us safe, one whispered warning at a time. That's the story, folks. Sometimes a simple train ride changes everything. If this kept you hooked, drop a comment and hit that subscribe button for more stories about ordinary people caught up in extraordinary situations. See you next time.